All right, everybody, buckle up, because today we're taking a deep dive into the origins of Islam. And let me tell you, this isn't like the usual stuff you hear.
Yeah,
We're going deep. You sent over these excerpts from Hagarism, The Making of the Islamic World. It's by Patricia Crone and Michael Cook. And whoa, boy,
this is a dense one.
this book, it really flips the script on how we think about, like, how Islam even began.
It definitely throws in some curveballs.
Yeah.
You know, like how we usually hear about Islam starting. Like it's this pretty straightforward story.
Right, right. Like Muhammad, Revelations, Mecca, boom, all done, new religion unlocked.
Exactly. Like a clean break from everything before it. But Crone and Cooks, they come in with this whole Hagarism idea. And basically, they're saying early Islam, not so clean cut.
Hold up, Hagarism.
Yeah, it's named after Hagar,
Yeah.
Abraham's wife. Their argument is that early Islam was tangled up with Judaism, big time. Maybe even saw itself as part of, get this, a Jewish messianic movement, at least at first, before it, went its own way.
Whoa, wait, slow down. So instead of a clean break, they're saying early Islam was like trying to like outdo Judaism or something.
Uh-huh. That's one way to put it. They even talk about how Umar, the second caliph was called Al-Faruq,
Yeah.
which has these messianic connotations, like he was the chosen one.
Oh, interesting.
And later Islamic scholars, they kind of tiptoed around that term.
Yeah.
But Crone and Cook are like, nope, that's a big clue. Something way more radical was going on back then.
Okay, now you've got my attention. But Kermont, are they just making this stuff up? What's their evidence for this whole Hagarism thing?
And that's what's so cool about this book, honestly. They don't just use one type of source. They've got early Christian writings, they've got Islamic traditions, they even pull in linguistics, all to build this really intricate argument about early Islam.
It's like putting together a puzzle.
Exactly. Like, remember the Constitution of Medina? The one that lays out how Muslims and Jews would, coexist?
Yeah, I vaguely remember that one from Koff College, maybe.
Right. Well, Crone and Cook argue that it shows a way more intertwined relationship than we usually think.
So it's like they're saying, hey, remember that document everyone kind of glosses over? We think it really means this, and by the way, it changes everything.
You got it. Hagarism is all about looking at the evidence with fresh eyes. Questioning assumptions.
Really?
Like they make a big deal about Hagar, Abraham's wife. They say that connection was central to how early Muslims saw themselves, which is so different from how Islam is usually understood, right?
It's wild. Okay, so we've got the traditional story. Islam starts fresh, totally separate from Judaism. But Hagarism is like, nope, they were knee-deep in the Jewish world. Maybe even more Jewish at first.
Nailed it.
It's like a total plot twist.
And that little difference, that shift in how we're thinking about it, huge implications. Like, it makes us rethink the whole timeline of how Islam developed. It makes us question how any religious identity really forms and changes over time.
Talk about a mind-blowing deep dive. So from your, expert historian perspective, what's the most convincing part of Hagarism? What makes it stand out?
One of the things that really struck me is how the book looks at the whole relationship between early Islam and Christianity.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't all, kumbaya from the get-go. Hagarism actually paints this picture of some serious early hostility towards Christians. Like, we're talking burning churches, straight up rejecting Jesus' divinity, the whole 9 yards.
Whoa, seriously. That's intense. Not exactly the interfaith dialogue we're used to hearing about these days.
Right. And this is where it gets even more juicy, right? So the book talks about how these early Islamic rulers, they use this figure of Abraham almost like a PR move, to kind of rebrand.
Oh, I like that. So it's like early Islamic PR, using Abraham to distance themselves from Judaism, kind of like, we're our own thing now.
Exactly. Like, we're all about Abraham. Yeah, he's our man, but we're doing things differently over here.
I can see that.
And the best part, they tie this whole thing into the term Hanif.
Oh, yeah, Hanif, right? Which today in Islam means someone who's all about the one God, right? Like a righteous dude.
Exactly. But here's the kicker. Originally, Hanif meant pagan.
Wait, what? Hold on, are you serious? Hanif went from pagan to proto-Muslim.
No, I'm serious. It's wild, right?
That's quite the image makeover.
It's like they took their pagan past and spun it into a religious virtue.
Talk about owning your history. Okay, so we've got Judaism in the mix, we've got this pagan influence, and then Hagarism throws in a whole other layer, Samaritanism.
Right. And speaking of shared history, the book dives into how early Islam might have borrowed from Samaritanism, which, just like this whole Judeo-Hagarism thing we're talking about, really digs Moses.
Interesting.
Like, they point out how early Islam's scripture, especially, it focuses a lot on the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible,
Yeah.
and kind of downplays the prophets who come later.
So instead of, like, David or Isaiah, it's all about Moses.
Exactly. And this emphasis on Moses, it's like a common thread between Judeo-Hagarism and Samaritanism. Because remember, Samaritans, they weren't so keen on the prophets either.
Huh. That's a really interesting connection, like finding a missing piece of a puzzle.
Right. Crone and Cook, they're connecting these dots between these different religious movements in a way that makes you see the whole picture so differently.
It's like early Islam was piecing together its identity from all these different traditions.
Exactly. And the Samaritan influence.
Yeah.
Way bigger part of that puzzle than we might think.
It's mind-blowing when you think about how jumbled up the religious landscape must have been back then. All these new movements popping up, drawing inspiration from older traditions. It must have been a real struggle to carve out a unique identity in all of that.
And that struggle, as Hagarism argues, it had some major consequences, especially when it came to early Islam's decisions about Roman law and Greek philosophy. Borrowing from other traditions, sure, that helped early Islam get off the ground. But these rejections, those choices came with a cost.
Okay, now you've got to break that down for me. Why would ditching Roman law and Greek philosophy be such a big deal? So Roman law, it was like the ultimate organizational tool back in the day, right?
Absolutely.
Like super clear rules, everything laid out, perfect for like managing these huge empires.
Exactly. And when early Islamic rulers decided to reject that, they were basically saying, we're going to build our own system from scratch.
Which is, ambitious, to say the least.
Totally. But it also meant they were going to run into a whole new set of problems when it came to, actually governing all that territory they were gaining.
It's like, imagine trying to bake a cake, right?
Yeah.
But you toss the recipe out the window.
Exactly.
You might get something that resembles a cake, but it's going to be a whole lot messier in that kitchen.
That's a great way to put it. And the thing is, it wasn't just Roman law. Crone and Cook, they argue that rejecting Greek philosophy, while it did, preserve this idea of a personal God, it also kind of slammed the door on this whole other way of looking at the world.
Right. Greek philosophy, logic, reason, all that good stuff.
Exactly. And that had really paved the way for, all the scientific thinking.
So by pushing back against that, are they saying Islam might, accidentally held back its own scientific progress?
That's the argument they're making. And it's definitely something to think about.
Man, this Hagarism book, it's really making me rethink, everything.
Right.
So just to recap, they're challenging the whole traditional origin story of Islam, saying there were all these deep connections to Judaism.
Deep connection.
Maybe even suggesting that early Islam was basically like a sect of Judaism before it branched off.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Then they throw in all these other influences like, whoa, paganism, and then Samaritanism, showing how early Islam was really pulling from all over to create its own thing.
Very much a work in progress kind of vibe.
Absolutely. And ultimately, they're saying some of those choices, those rejections, like ditching Roman law, ditching Greek philosophy, they had some serious long-term consequences.
And we're still grappling with some of those today.
It really makes you wonder, what would Islamic civilization look like now if those early leaders had made different choices?
It's the million-dollar question.
It really is.
And that's what I love about Hagarism, It's not just a history book. It's like an invitation to rethink everything we thought we knew about, where Islam came from and how it all began. It reminds us that history's messy, full of twists and turns and surprising connections.
It's definitely not a straight line from A to B.
No, not at all. And most importantly, it shows how the stories we tell about the past, they have a huge impact on how we understand the present.
It's so true. Well, on that note, folks, this has been one heck of a deep dive. I want to thank all of you for listening. We hope this got your brains buzzing, maybe inspired you to do some of your own digging into this stuff.
There's always more to learn.
Always. History's full of surprises, so keep those questions coming, keep exploring, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.